Hello everyone, it's Rachna here with another presentation on the Face of It by Suzanne Hill from the book Vistas, NCERT Class 12. Before we move on for the chapter, let's know about the author. Suzanne Hill is an English author of fiction and non-fiction works. Her novels include The Woman in Black, The Mist in the Mirror, and I Am the King of the Castle, for which she received the Somerset Maugham Award in the year 1971. The introduction of the chapter. The story is about a teenage boy, Derry, who has a burnt face, and Mr. Lamb, who is a disabled old man with an artificial leg made of tin. Derry accidentally enters his garden so that he can hide himself from people who hate him because of his ugly face. Mr. Lamb not only welcomes him in his garden but also encourages him to lead a normal life, leaving behind his past. So let's move on for the explanation of the chapter in detail. The chapter is divided into Scene 1, Scene 2 and Scene 3. So let's move on for Scene 1. The narrator describes the setting of Scene 1. The location is Mr. Lamb's garden. One can occasionally hear the birds singing and the low sound of the tree leaves. Derry, a young boy, enters the garden hesitantly. When he comes out of the bushes, he is surprised to hear Mr. Lamb talking to him. Mr. Lamb warns him about the crab apples that usually fell in the long grass from the tree above. Derry was shocked on hearing a voice. He asked as to who it was. Mr. Lamb introduced himself and also said that small sour apples known as crab apples had fallen on the ground. If Derry would not be careful while walking through the grass, he could trip over them and get hurt. Derry said that he didn't know that someone was present in the garden. He thought it to be empty, and even the house seemed empty to him. Mr. Lamb tried to comfort him by saying that the house was empty as he was out in the garden. He also asked him not to be afraid. Derry wanted to leave the place. Mr. Lamb tried to stop him and said that there was no need to leave the garden just because of him. He also told him that he kept the gate open for people. It was only Derry who jumped the wall. Derry got angry for being pointed at that. He also clarified that he had come to steal anything. From there, Mr. Lamb agreed by saying that at many times apples had been stolen by young boys and that Derry was not so young. But still, Derry wanted to leave. Mr. Lamb told him not to be afraid of him and asked him to stay there for a while. Derry told him that he was not afraid of anyone. Rather, people were afraid of him. Lamb asked him the reason for that. He told him that he knew what people thought and how they behaved in front of him. Mr. Lamb questioned him about what others thought of him. Derry said that people got scared on seeing his face. Some considered it bad or ugly, while some even took pity on him by saying that he was a poor boy. He added that they were fake. Actually, they all were afraid of his face. He even got scared of his own face when he looked into the mirror. He added that Mr. Lamb will also pity him, but in his heart, he will also be scared of Derry. Mr. Lamb said that he wasn't afraid of Derry. Derry was shocked to hear that. Then Mr. Lamb told him that he would bring a ladder and stick and pick fine and ripe crab apples as they made a good jelly. He also told him that in September they get ripe and become a magic fruit having orange and golden color. He also asked him to join him in doing so. Derry pointed him for changing the topic just like other people did. He added that Mr. Lamb didn't ask him about his face because he was afraid of asking about it. Derry got annoyed and said that he did not like the company of people Mr. Lamb guessed that maybe his face got burned in some fire. Derry told him that it was due to acid that had burned half of his face. He was so grieved that he kept on repeating that acid ate his face and that it would never get cured. Mr. Lamb did not agree with him. Derry thought that he was not interested in his story. To this, Mr. Lamb said that he was interested in each and every creation of God. He pointed out at a wall and asked him what did he see beyond it. Derry replied that there was weeds or unwanted plants. Mr. Lamb explained that there were a number of plants in this garden. There were flowers, trees, herbs. Some plants were considered good, some were called unwanted plants. It was not because they were different, all of them were green in color. It was about how people considered them to be herbs or weeds. In reality, they all were same, just like Derry and himself. Derry did not agree to this. Mr. Lamb told him that there was no difference. He was young and Mr. Lamb was old. He had a burnt face and Mr. Lamb had a tin leg. These things were not so important and so they didn't make any difference. Derry asked him the reason behind his tin leg. He replied, it got damaged in an explosion many years ago. Kids teased him by calling him Lemmy Lamb. Derry said that he could cover the tin leg with his trouser so that no one could see it. Mr. Lamb said that it would not bother him much as one day people will get tired of teasing him and would start discussing something else. Derry showed his face in reply to Lamb's statement. Mr. Lamb suggested that things like crab apples, weeds, spiders, and the tall sunflowers could also be some of the other things that people would probably look at and discuss. Derry commented that the other things mentioned by Mr. Lamb were things that they were not living. Mr. Lamb replied that all the things were related to each other, just like beauty is related to the beast. A beautiful creation is related to ugliness. Derry was confused. Mr. Lamb asked for Derry's opinion. Derry replied that often he had heard people saying that beauty is not related to one's appearance. Rather, inner beauty is our real beauty. Even a handsome man is the one who does something good rather than one who looks good. He said that once a beautiful girl loved the beast for who he was and kissed him, which turned the beast into a handsome prince. He wouldn't have changed if she hadn't kissed him. But then he said that he won't change. Mr. Lamb said that Derry was right at that. Derry said that no one would kiss him ever because of his face. Even his mother kissed him on the good side of his face. He did not like this at all. He said he didn't care even if nobody kissed him. Mr. Lamb asked him that did Derry ever want to kiss someone. Derry asked him what he was talking about. Mr. Lamb said that probably Derry wanted to kiss pretty girls who had long hair and large eyes or other people whom Derry loved. Derry replied that no one would ever allow him to do so. Mr. Lamb said that this was unpredictable. Derry said that he was never look different. When he will be as old as Mr. Lamb, then also he will have only half a face. Mr. Lamb said that yes, he will always have half a face, but the world was full of so many things to look at. So he must look at its beauty. Derry questioned him that was the garden the whole world for him. Lamb said that when he was present in the garden, then the garden was his world. He then questioned him whether his leg hurt. Lamb replied that tin didn't hurt, it never pained. Derry asked him if he suffered pain when he lost his leg. Lamb said that it pained back then. He then asked him if it pained now. where the artificial leg struck on the real one. Lamb said that sometimes it pained it wet weather, but it was not that important. Derry said that he could understand what he meant by all this, as he had heard people saying that you should take a lesson from those who suffer in pain and never cry or complain about their problems. Mr. Lamb said that he didn't say so. Derry continued that people told him to look at those people who were in worse condition than him. They told him that he might have become blind, be born deaf, or be handicapped and have to remain in a wheelchair. He may even have been born with mental disorder. Mr. Lamb said that yes, it was true, and that Derry knew so much. Derry said that all this would not change his face. One day, as he was waiting at a bus stop, a woman passed by him. He heard her telling another woman that he had such a terrible face that only his mother could love him and no one else could. Mr. Lamb asked him, did he believe what he heard? Derry stressed that he heard it. Mr. Lamb asked that was this the only thing he had heard from someone? Derry said that no, he had heard many other things too. Lamb suggested him to shut his ears. He should ignore all this. Derry found Lamb's words strange and added that he couldn't understand his questions. Mr. Lamb said that he liked to talk and also liked the company of others. He also told him that there was no need to answer him as the gates were open. He could leave if he wanted to. Derry did not leave, and he seemed unsure of it. Mr. Lamb said that there was a beehive in one of the trees. People considered the buzzing sound of the bees to be a noise, but for him it was a song sung by the bees. Derry explained that he had liked the place for outside and so had entered the garden. Mr. Lamb questioned that would be that he have entered had been seen. Mr. Lamb questioned that would he have entered had seen the Mr. Lamb, to which Derry replied in the negative. Derry said that if he would have entered his garden even after knowing that it was there, it would have been without his permission. Mr. Lamb said that was not the real reason. Derry said that he did not like going near people as they got afraid of him and stared at him. Mr. Lamb suggested that he could lock himself in a room forever. He then narrated a story about the man who locked himself in a room as he was afraid of everything. The man thought that he would meet with an accident with a bus. He would catch infection from someone. A donkey would kick him to death. The lightning may hit him, or he may die because the girl whom he loved may leave him, or he may even slip off a banana and people would laugh at him. In order to safeguard himself from all such incidents, he locked himself in his room. Derry surprisingly asked Mr. Lamb if he locked himself forever. He replied, no, he did so for a while. Derry asked him what happened next. Mr. Lamb replied that a picture fell on his head and he died. This made him laugh a lot, and he said that Mr. Lamb narrated strange talks. Mr. Lamb said that they were strange for some people. Derry asked what Mr. Lamb did all day. He replied that he sat in the sun reading books. He said that the house was full of books. Derry looked at the house and said that there weren't any curtains on the windows. Mr. Lamb replied that he did not like curtains. He liked transparency, light, darkness, and the wind too. Derry added that he also liked all of them, and he also liked the sound of the rain falling on the roof of his house. Mr. Lamb commented that Derry was present-minded as he could hear. Derry said that his family worried about him, that what would he do in the future with a burnt face. Mr. Lamb said that Derry had everything: 2 arms, 2 legs, 2 eyes, 2 ears, etc. He wanted to make Derry realize that he had so much which many other people were deprived of. He added that Derry could accomplish a lot if he determined to do so. Derry asked, how was it possible? And Mr. Lamb replied that the same was as he did. Derry asked if Mr. Lamb had any friends, and he replied that he had a few hundred of them. Derry further said that still he lived alone in such a big house. Mr. Lamb said that everyone was his friend. Many people visited the garden. The gate remained open. They sat there by the fire in winter season. Kids came to pick and apples and pears and to take the honey toffees made by him. Derry said that he wasn't a friend of Mr. Lamb. He said that Derry was a friend because he had not done any such thing that should cease their friendship. Derry said that they did not know each other well to become friends. Mr. Lamb did not consider that to be important. He did not need Derry's particulars before becoming friends with him. Mr. Lamb said that if he wished, he could tell him his name. Derry replied that his name was Derrick, but he disliked it and wanted to be called Derry instead. He added that he might not visit the place in future and then they would not remain friends anymore. Mr. Lamb asked the reason, and Derry replied that one crosses many people while walking down the street, might speak to a few of them and never see them again. This did not mean that they had become friends. Mr. Lamb commented that it did not mean that strangers were enemies, if not friends. Derry said that they were nothing, just people. Mr. Lamb said that could not be that people were nothing to each other. Derry said that there were some people whom he hated. Mr. Lamb replied that hatred would harm him more than the acid that had only affected his face. Derry commented that only his face. Mr. Lamb said that a bomb explosion blew up his leg, but there were worse things that could happen. One could burn himself from the inside by the negative feelings. Derry said that when he had returned from the hospital, a person had said that it was better if he had remained there with people like him. He added that people think all disabled people should remain together at one place. Mr. Lamb added this meant that people without legs should remain together and the world would become imbalanced that way. Derry said that at least no one would stare at the other because of all of them were similar. Mr. Lamb asked Derry that did he mean that he was like all other people with burned faces just because they had similar appearance? He added that everything was different. Although all things are the same, yet they are different. Derry was again confused. Mr. Lamb said that our habits of watching, listening, and thinking differently made us different from each other. Derry said that he liked Mr. Lamb's house and garden. He replied that Derry was always welcome there. Derry said that the place was not his. Mr. Lamb said that everything was his if he wanted it to be. He added that all his possessions were for everyone. Derry asked if he could visit the place again, and Mr. Lamb replied that he could and he would find company too. He added that Derry needn't mind other people. No one would stop him from entering the premises. Derry said that they probably would not like to enter the place upon seeing him. Maybe they would look at his face, get scared, and run away. Mr. Lamb replied that they might or might not run away and that he had to take a chance on that. Derry said that Mr. Lamb had no choice out of him and the other people as visitors because no one liked to remain near him. Mr. Lamb would lose all his friends if he had Derry in his garden. Mr. Lamb said that he was there and did not run away on seeing Derry. He did. He added that when he went out on the street, kids teased him although they visited his garden and his house. It was like a game. They were not scared of him because he was not scared of them. Derry asked that did his leg get injured in the war, and Mr. Lamb replied that it did so. Derry asked that how would he climb up the ladder to pluck the apples. He replied that there were a lot of things that he had learned to do. Derry added that if he climbed the tree alone, fell from it, and broke his neck, he would lie on the grass, dead. Mr. Lamb said that it could happen. Derry asked if he could help him pluck the apples. Mr. Lamb said that he could help him if he wanted to. Derry said that his mother would be waiting for him. His home was 5 miles away, across the fields. He was 14 years of age, but still he was supposed to tell her where he was. Mr. Lamb added that people had the habit of worrying. Derry added that actually they were in the habit of fussing. Mr. Lamb asked Derry to go home and inform his mother of his whereabouts. His house was 3 miles away. As the weather was fine and he had legs, he could easily go home, tell them, and return. Derry said that once he went home, he would not be allowed to return. Mr. Lamb added that once home, Derry himself would not feel like coming back. Derry said that Mr. Lamb did not know what all he could do. Mr. Lamb said that only Derry knew what he could do. Derry started to say that if he chose, but was interrupted by Mr. Lamb. He said that Derry had to choose and he could not tell him what to do. Derry said that his family forced him to do things their way. Mr. Lamb said that it was Derry's wish to agree with them or not. Derry was confused about what he wanted, something that was only his, and no one had it. Like the garden, Mr. Lamb said that he could find out what he wanted. Derry asked how he could do that. Mr. Lamb told him to wait, watch, and listen. He added that he had to see the bees. Derry asked that did the other visitors talk to Mr. Lamb. Mr. Lamb replied that some did while some did not. Derry said that he did not believe that someone ever visited the place. Mr. Lamb lived alone all by himself. No one cared for him. Mr. Lamb said that Derry could think as he pleased. Derry asked him the names of some of the visitors. Mr. Lamb said that the names were nothing. They could be like Tom, Dick, or Harry. He left to see the bees. Derry said that perhaps Mr. Lamb was mentally challenged. Mr. Lamb said that was a good excuse for Derry, but Derry said that Mr. Lamb did not talk sense and that's why he said so. Mr. Lamb repeated that it was a good excuse for not returning to the garden. Derry's face was burned, which was other people's excuse for not seeing Derry. Derry said that Mr. Lamb was like other people. If he was not sorry that his face was burned, then maybe he was scared of it. If not that, then maybe he thought that Derry was as ugly as a devil. He added that he was a devil. Derry shouted. Mr. Lamb did not reply. He had gone to see the bees. Derry became calm and said that Mr. Lamb did not think him to be a devil. He liked to be in the garden. Derry got up and shouted that he was leaving and that he would return to see him. He did not have a thin leg, could run and could be back soon. Derry ran off. The place was silent with the sounds of the creatures of the garden. Mr. Lamb talked to the bees that they saw all that happened. They all knew that no one ever returned to the garden. Now let's move on for scene 2, at Derry's house. The second scene is at Derry's house and Derry is talking to his mother. His mother asks, what did Derry think of her? She had already heard about Mr. Lamb. Derry told her not to believe what others said about him. She warned him that she knew what was required to be known about any person and therefore asked him not to go back. Derry asked her the reason of her fear. He told her that Mr. Lamb was just an old man with a tin leg and had a big house without curtains and a garden. He said that he wanted to go back and listen to things. His mother was curious to know what was it that he wanted to listen. He replied that he wanted to hear bees singing and wanted to listen to what Mr. Lamb said. But she didn't find it suitable and so she told him to stay at home and think about what he wanted to. Derry said that he hated to remain at home. His mother excused him for speaking wrong because he felt bad and so spoke that way. Derry said that it had nothing to do with his face. The important thing was how he thought and what he saw or heard. He announced that he would go back into the garden to help Mr. Lamb with the crab apples. His mother tried to stop him, but he ran away, shutting the door behind him. The last part of the chapter, scene 3. The third scene in Mr. Lamb's garden. There was the sound of branches. Mr. Lamb was talking to himself while he was plucking the apples. Suddenly, harsh sound of the cracking wood was heard, and the ladder fell on the ground. Mr. Lamb fell too. Derry opened the gate. He was still breathing rapidly and declared to Mr. Lamb that he had returned. He looked at him and found him lying on the ground. He went near him and tried to talk to him, but no one replied. Derry kept on calling him by his name and suddenly started crying. He did so because he realized that Mr. Lamb was dead. A very touching and a very good story. I hope you understand, and here's a summary for you to go through it. Thank you.